Right on. Okay. Welcome to Ancient Magic. So we are going to get started. So I feel like if you are drawn to this, then you automatically have a connection to not just yourself, but to divinity. There's something that you're connecting with that is hidden within our realm. And so I do want to get into it. So I want to get started on a little bit of an introduction and connect us. And then we're going to get into some history. And I have certain gods and goddesses that I want you to work with through this class. So in order to get into that, I just want to start with a little bit of an introduction. So in the chat, put down, have any of you practiced any type of Egyptian magic? I mean, before I got into Egyptian magic, I learned a little bit in school. And, I always had a fear. I'm going to tell you a little bit before I get started, but wow, interesting. This is going to be so much fun. So I used to have a little bit of fear about Egyptian magic. And I know like I've had dreams of certain Egyptian happenings, right? So I dreamt of Osiris once and Horus and different things. But tarot cards, I don't know if it's still today, but tarot cards were illegal. Like 20 years ago, they were illegal. Like your arm could get cut off if you got caught with a pack of tarot. So I was always scared of visiting the country just because of what I do. And it's like, I don't know how to travel without my cards. That's an impossible thing for me. But as far as the magic, so much of the creation of our occult and of our magical mysteries stem from this. So I am really excited to share that. So first, let's think about man as cosmos, okay? So man is cosmos. And to express harmony or beauty of human nature, the Egyptians said Nefer, N-E-F-E-R. So Nefer is a magical word. And before I move on, I'm going to go into a little bit about that. So in ancient Egypt, the word for zero was Nefer. And this word, whose hieroglyphic symbol is a heart with a trachea, so like that in the throat, right? It means beautiful, pleasant, and good. But it also represented the base level from which temples and other buildings arose. Okay. And there was actually in 2197 to 2193 BCE, there was an Egyptian pharaoh who ruled for 2 years and 1 month and a day. And he was known as Nefer. But Nefer means perfect and it means complete. So put that down on paper and remember that that is actually a magical word. Okay. So now man is cosmos. And to express the harmony or the beauty of human nature, the Egyptians said Nefer. Plato was actually a student in Egypt. He uses the word beauty, which was kalos, K-A-L-O-S. and that was to refer to the order in the world. So the hieroglyph, which was the sacred language of Egypt, and we'll get into that in a few minutes, what for the word was actually known as the heart and the trachea, but it was symbolized as a musical instrument. And the heart was implying a sense of harmony. And by this visual, it was considered that there was a myth relating to the Eye of Horus that describes the fracturing of Osiris. And yet he is invoked by the name of Un-Nefer, meaning harmonic being or beautiful being. So this power was always dealing with a higher power. And they believed back then that their language, their hieroglyphs, were the carvings were manifestations, like talismans. And so we're going to get into a few different things and a few different gods and how their religion and their spirituality came about. So let's go into the Un-Nefer. And that, remember, means harmonic being. So if we want to go into a place of harmony, we can call Nefer. And that will give us the dealings with the spirit of harmony by bringing us the power of equilibrium into our being. The meaning of the Eye of Horus is religious and spiritual. And its meaning can only be comprehended in this language to which the pharaohs, which was also known as pharaonic art, okay, which is the transformation of the consciousness of man. And that transformation and consciousness of man, why did they want that? Because they believed in the power of attainment. In ancient Egypt, they believed that the power and the things that they were seeking in life, they were doing it for the divine. And it's a little bit of a different thinking than we have today. But we learn from the pharaohs and the Egyptian myth of the Eye of Horus, which is to speak of Horus, the spiritual man, as having two eyes. And we're going to go into the power of the Eye of Ra and the Eye of Horus. So having two eyes, okay, symbolically represented by the sun and the moon. So in your chat, write down if you have ever seen the Eye of Ra and the Eye of Horus. Just say yes. So those represent the sun and the moon. And the legend of the cosmic man with his eyes as the sun and the moon. Okay, and you probably, and if you had a natural connection to it, it's probably because of this magic. So we look at these eyes, the Eye of Horus, the Eye of Ra, right? They're the eyes that represent the sun and the moon. The legend of cosmic man with his eyes as the sun and the moon. And that actually is also present in many different cultures, in ancient cultures, even in Hinduism. And actually Hinduism and Egyptian are very connected in many different ways. But they connect this analogy between cosmic man And in pharaonic Egypt, so the time of the pharaohs, it was known that the cosmic person, whose eyes are the sun and the moon, will focus. And this focus represents exposing a cosmic language that's involved. So the entire religion, that's so funny. I love it. And so the entire religion is actually an idea that they will focus on the idea behind the Eye of Horus, which is also known as the Wedjat, Wedjat. And this is about making drawings or language into other spiritual cultures and realms. So learning Egyptian magic, you have to know that you're learning about this sacred stuff, right? And this stuff was not to be exposed. Only the pharaohs were the ones that could do magic. And so we also know that the functions of nature and the universe is an image of the psychic and spiritual functions at work within us and our magic. So some of you might be a little newer into magic, and some of you may have been in some training for some while, but we know that the functions of nature and the universe is an image of psychic and spiritual functions that work within our realm. And in this realm, the gods are seen as vital functions in nature, but also vital functions in us. So we have that connection. We are part of the whole of nature. And we are actually patterned, I would say, in a spiritual or sacred language. So the purpose of Egyptian magic is to know themselves by reflecting on the natural functions that you're working with. And the Egyptians were masters of the sacred language of doing this. So if you do have a candle, and if not, that's okay. But if you do have a candle, hold it or look at it if it's lit. And I want you to say after me, you are the supreme, imperishable, who one must recognize in the world. You are the treasure, eternal guardian of the law. Your being is eternal. That is what I see. I see you without a beginning, without middle or end. Your energy is infinite. For eyes you have the sun and the moon. Your mouth is blazing fire. And with it, you heat the universe. And then light your candle. And you do want to kind of take note if you feel any warmth around you, because That is a traditional invocation to open our eyes to the spirit within the day and the night. Now, you have to remember, even though we are going to be getting into Egyptian magic and there's lots of different creatures and different things that you're going to learn about, Egyptian magic is about attainment. Okay. So you don't have to worry about summing up anything freaky. I know what I'm doing. And this is for you to connect to. These are amazing blessings that actually are the foundations of our magic. So I want to go into the Eye of Horus. So one element, which is the key to the Egyptian mysteries, is the Eye of Horus. And its mystery is very deep. And so you can Google it until we meet again. Watch videos on it, whatever. But it's very deep and it's worth looking into. So I can teach you a little bit about it, but there's a world behind it. There's ideas behind the mysteries, and there's riddles of the pharaohs and their science. And it all has to do with archaic energy, their mentality. So it's all higher realm thinking. So let us begin by considering that the hieroglyph for the Eye of Horus, which is known as the Wedjat, is comprised of numerical values. So think numbers and math. Oh, and, you know, I think that's one of the reasons why I was like, the Egyptian magic was one of the ones I really had to push myself to delve into, because math was just not my thing. So if you are into math, you're really going to connect with this. And if you aren't, hopefully you will too. But for me, I was like, math, I had a little bit of an attitude. But either way, each part of the eye represents a different number value. And it is a fraction of unity. Okay. So the addition of these fractions, however, they do not add up to unity, but they have another fraction. And it all equals 63 over 64. So we have the half, we have the quarter, we have the eighth, we have the 16th, the 30, the 1 over 32, and the 1 over 64. And that equals 63 over 64. So the fraction of 63/64 is just what the name means, a fraction, a part of unity. So unity as one is always fractions in the process of the cosmogenesis. Okay, so that would be a good word. I have lots of courses on numerology. That would be a good word for you to check up, cosmogenesis. For without a fractioning of unity, there can be no multiplication, okay? But the fractioning of unity presented within the Eye of Horus represents an equilibrium of a special kind. And this dynamic equilibrium, as we will see, is represented by the golden ratio. And you're like, golden ratio? I love the golden ratio thing. So the golden ratio is the concept that is in everything. Okay. And so before we come to the concept of cosmic man, who has acquired the solar and lunar vision, we will make the symbolism connect to the pharaoh philosophy and the astrological symbolism in which we'll go through the fraction. So, meaning that astrology is very important with Egyptian magic. Okay. So this fraction that I'm talking about, just as the Eye of Horus is in Egypt, there is fractions that have to do with astronomy. And all of these fractions relate to the cycles of the sun and the moon. And they are also associated to the cosmic man, right? We are that cosmic man. And the periods of the sun and moon actually show two more basic ways to measure time. One is the lunar time and the other is the solar time. So the solar year is 365 days. Well, it's actually 365.242 days long. And its interval of time is from the summer solstice to the summer solstice. And that is a time for the return of the sun to its position in the zodiac, which is relative to the 4 solar nodes of the equinox or the solstices. So another reason why we practice magic during the Sabbath. And a period from full moon to full moon or new moon to new moon is a lunatation. And the interval of a tropical year, there are 12.368 lunatations or periods from new moon to new moon. So by simple calculation, this cycle itself is to be on average 29.530 days. So geometrically, which is also a proportional function at play in astronomy, represents the ratio between the solar year and the lunar year. And that's actually where a lot of the power of the pentagram and the number 13 comes in. All of these symbols, these sacred symbols you see in magic, all have to do with golden proportions and the ratios of the Pythagoreans, like the triangle and the different presents. And some of these symbols were actually created by accident, okay? But when it comes to the harmony of Nefer, which is installed in the cosmos, the golden ratio is also appreciated at play in our astrological cycle of the sun and the moon. So they used the pentagram and the Pythagorean triangle as hints at the presence of these symbols, of these cycles. So the beauty and the mystery of the lunisolar cycle is that they can be calculated very easily if you're good at math. Back then, I mean, they must have been so smart. But they could use these and calculate it very easy using the golden ratio and the fraction. And they would actually call it, there's different names for it. There's the draconic cycle. And that was something that they would use. But mainly the solar year itself was something that they found quite powerful. And they would calculate it and create revolutions around the lunar nodes or around the zodiac. And they would use this power, just like we will tap into the power of the moon, but they would use these periods. It was like the golden number that they can invoke in simple ways to make impossible things come to chance. So I'm going to move on. So, because there is a lot about that, but let's go into a little bit more. So let's start at the beginning. So there is a timeline when it comes to Egyptian magic. And I want to start with the first one. And that has to do with um, the beginning. So where do I find that? Okay, so the beginning of Egyptian creation. So Egyptian mythology can be very complicated. Why? Because there's not any books of it. They were all destroyed and created, and all we have is their symbology through the hieroglyphs that people are still studying. Okay. So far, this is what, we have come up with, or this is a lot of how I connect to it as well. So Egyptian mythology can be very complicated. And when you're looking at different gods and goddesses, you're going to see different stories. Basically, connect to the one that resonates with you. Okay. It's like everything. Someone's full of shit, you know it. You're told they're full of shit. I don't believe that. Listen to that voice. So we tend to think of Egyptian mythology as stories, but there's facts in these stories. And that's what I want to get into. So depending on where you are or what you've heard, creation stories are different. And I love creation myths. I studied every single religion and their creation myths because I really found I wanted to connect to why people believe in the God of creation. So I want to go into the story of the first God. Okay. So let's start with chaos. In the beginning, there was nothing but a dark, watery domain of nothingness. It was both nothing and everything. And in no place there was anything but nothingness. An Egyptian myth. This nothing became personified as new or none. Interesting though, new would eventually give away to creation because it was still thought to exist beyond the boundaries of the world, living still. But it was from none that the waters of the Nile were thought to originate. In a way, none was the father of all, because even the creator came out of none. While it's unclear at what point none became personified as ancient Egyptian culture, we do know that he is not the only personified aspect related to the story. So there was one version of the story where aspects of none were given personality and eventually formed the eight, or the Ogdod of Hermopolis. And this Ogdod had to either change or die in order for creation to happen. So when they came into the world, there were 4 males and 4 females. The males were amphibious in nature, and the females were reptilian. And these were the creatures thought to inhabit the primeval waters of nothingness. Have you ever heard of the reptilians? Creeped me out when I first saw, I think I saw a movie on it and it creeped me out. Either way. So each male was paired with a female. And it was Amun or Amun and Amenet. And they represented the unknowable quality of the water, presented through elements like air and invisibility. Then there was He and He. Okay? And they represented just how boundless the water was. Then there was Kek and Keket, and they represented the darkness associated with the watery abyss. And then there was Nun and Nonet, representing the water itself. Now, in this version, the creative of the creation myth, these couples became the fathers and mothers of all that exists. Amun would later grow in prominence and sometimes said to be the father of the eight, despite the fact that they all came out of Nun. And in some versions, Amun was the sun god who would eventually lead creation. But there was an emergence of a creator. And the creator is one figure with many faces, depending on the time period where a myth was born or the region. But in almost all cases, the creator was always a sun god. And at some point in the midst of chaos, the creator emerged. And there were a variety of ways this happened. He was born of a cow. He emerged from a lotus flower on the water. He emerged from a cosmic egg. He alighted as a Bennu bird on the first emerging solid land. But regardless of how it happened, there was an emphasis that the creator was a self-created God. And in the coffin context, so when you see the carvings on the coffin, the god was Atum, who brings forth the other eight, Agdod, by discoursing with Nun and naming them, by giving definition to the attributes, the power that the eight embodied. And so sometimes the creator God was referred to as the one who made himself into millions, signifying that this God would eventually bring all of creation into existence. So there were certain gods that were said to be the creator in the beginning, but it all enabled him to come into being or gain the ability to create things by naming them. So some of these gods included Hu, H-U, and the word the creator used to begin creation. So if we are creating something, if we are holding a candle and we want to put our intention into it and create the magic of it, we can say Hu. And I always say it 3 times. Hu, hu, hu. Oh, it always feels weird to do it for people, but obviously when I do it alone, it's a little different. Okay, but that was the Egyptian word to begin your creation. Pretty interesting. I love that. Who? And how many times he said, who was that? Right? The beginning of creation. Okay. Then there is Sia. So S-I-A. And Sia is the embodiment of perception and intelligence. So if you need guidance or you want to see, like, where is this going? Sia, right? That should be easy. I want to see where is this going. Sia is the word, the magical word, and also the power of a god to embody perception. We can use it. Say it before you're in a class to remember it all. Okay, so Sia, embodiment of perception and intelligence. So create and see. The next one is Heka, H-E-K-A. And this is the god of magic and ritual. And what I'm teaching you is actually carved on the coffin. So those three words. And the coffin text also said, before duality had yet come into being. So let's put that all together. Who? The word the creator used to begin creation. Sia, the embodiment of perception and intelligence. Heka, the god of magic and ritual, before duality had yet come into being. So we've already mentioned Atum, A-T-U-M. The pyramid text describe him as creating twins. Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. And the coffin texts say they came from his breath. But did you know that the Christianized version describe him as masturbating and asexually creating twins? Either way, I'll move on. So Ptah, P-T-A-H, was another creator who was worshipped in early kingdom. And he was the creator of craftsmanship. So whenever you were doing a craft, whether it was herbs or steel, Ptah was the one that they would worship or call upon to when they were doing their work. P-T-A-H. Now, a lot of people will see a god that has a ram's head. So there is, I'm not even good at saying it, Khnum, K-H-N-U-M. And he was one more creator that was said to have created the gods. And he was the one that had the first ram's head. But he was also a lot of times shown as a craftsman because he made things at the command of a different creator. And then we have Ra. We've all heard of Ra, and we'll be getting a lot more into Ra. But Ra is another important sun god as far as the role of creator, and he is probably the best known today. And there is other sun gods as well that they had. They had a scarab-faced god that represented the rising sun. And a lot of times you'll see a scarab as the rising sun in art, Egyptian art. Well, that represents the god Khepri. So K-H-E-P-R-I. Then we have, if you ever just see a disk of the sun, that represents the god Aten. Aten, and it's just a disk. And then we have the god of invisibility and air, which later merged with Ra. And that power and god became Amun Ra. So Amun, Amun, represents the gods of air and invisibility. So we can actually call Amun Ra to bring heat into our room. And I want you to practice that. Like, just relax somewhere when you have a few minutes and you're by yourself, and just like say it 3 times and wait to see if you feel any change in yourself or in the atmosphere. Because if you feel the change in the atmosphere, then that's where your magic is right now. But if you feel that the change is happening in you and you get hot, then the change and the power is happening within you. So you can find out by bringing in Amun or Amun Ra, however you feel comfortable, to see Amun Ra is going to bring the warm air, to see if your power is within or without right now. Okay. And then there's Horus, the god of the sky. And we'll be going into some of that. So creator gods were often depicted as existing without gender. So I know, I was saying he or whatever, but they were described as both the father and mother of all things. Okay. So in the case of Atum, he becomes male after giving birth to his children, Shu and Tefnut. So there is changing forms with changing power. And that's one of the language of their hieroglyph also will show that the change that happens when they are enacting creation in a certain way. And once the creator is born, then the mound emerges from the water and space is given for creation to occur. So it's pretty interesting. I want you to kind of look at the creation of Egyptian. I do find that it always initiates with coming of light, a ray from the sun, right? So it always represents the eye, a child, or a fiery bird, okay? Let me see where I want to get into right now. Okay, so how did the creations come then of humans, right? So that was the creation of the gods, right? But there is a separation from the earth and the sky. And one of the most important events was the creation of the world and how it allowed life to flourish. And it gave birth to the Egyptian cosmos. So the Egyptians viewed the cosmos as being divided into an upper sky, the world beneath, and the underworld below. And the underworld was called Dat or Duat. So D-A-T or D-U-A-T. And humans were created after all of the events of the gods. And though their creation is not prominent in Egyptian texts, their existence is mentioned more after. And there's a lot of cohesion between the ideas. So for example, in one version, they said that humans came from Atum's tears upon reuniting with his lost twin. But in other versions, humans were not created until the separation of the earth and the sky. So regardless, the origin of humans seemed to be less important to the Egyptians than it was to, other cultures and their mythologies. So most creations were associated with a particular god, a worship with a particular god. And it was usually centered around one. And that happened in the larger cities in Egypt. And it is from the different separations that's why there's conflicting versions of the stories of creation or how the humans were created. But there were 4 different myths. There was the Hermopolis, Hermopolis, or S, and that was a major city that was near the border of Lower Egypt. And then there was Heliopolis, Heliopolis, and that was another major city that was located in Lower Egypt, and that's actually modern day Cairo. And in that area, that is where the myth involving Atum, the story that gives us the birth of Shu and Tefnut, the twins, and they eventually had the entire pantheon. And that included gods such as Osiris, Set, Isis, so some major gods from there. And then there was Memphis. So Memphis was another major city in Egypt. And I guess the myth of Ptah, the prominent figure of creation, came from there. And that was the god of craftsmen. And then we have Thebes, or Thebes, and that was Upper Egypt. And that was, it became a supreme god Amun there, as well as many Egyptian pantheon gods. So it was important because it was the location of the original mound that came from the sea. Okay. So I do find that kind of interesting about that. So I wanted to go a little bit into the family tree of where the Egyptian gods started. So that was the first one, Atum Ra, and then from him, it was Shu and Tefnut, right? And then from them, we'll go into Gebenut, and then the other gods that we're going to study. Okay, let me see. I want to move into something. What do I want to do? I wanted really to get into the heart of the heart magic. Let me see if I can find that. Okay, we did the dark watery of nothingness. Let's go into, where is it? Sorry. There we go. I think it is in the book. Let's see. I'm trying to find my heart ceremony. I think it's in the Eye of Horus. The Eye of Horus. Okay, let's get back into the Eye of Horus. Ah, where is it? I'm on the wrong thing. If you have any questions, you can let me know. I think it's on my. Okay. Actually, I'm going to move on. I can't find it. So I'm going to do a little bit about the Book of the Dead. So the Egyptian Book of the Dead is famous. If you've seen it or heard of it, right, put down yes there. I'd like to know. So the Book of the Dead was known to be a collection, an ancient Egyptian connection to the different gods. Okay. And before I get into the Book of the Dead, okay, awesome, you're intrigued. Okay, so before I get into the Book of the Dead, I want to talk about the Book of Thoth. Okay, so Thoth is, we're going to get into Thoth and his magic, but we're not there yet. So Thoth is the Egyptian god of writing and knowledge. And that's where many of these claims exist by ancient authors. He wrote a magical book. And Thoth believed in the scribes. So the hieroglyphs that we read in ancient Egyptian was magical. And every single hieroglyph that they used was known as a sigil or like an amulet or a charm. Okay. And he created this because he believed that the authors and the things that he was creating came from another realm. So he believed that everything that he wrote, he channeled. So the Book of Thoth is part of an ancient text, and as well as going into some of the magic that is in the Book of the Dead. So Egyptian language was meant to be created and used by pharaohs only, because every scribe was magical. So people, normal people, regular people, weren't actually allowed to even write or scribe. It was only by the pharaohs or their people. So I want to do a little bit of the Book of the Dead every class. So let's go into it. So the Book of the Dead initially has been known as the Papyrus of Ani, A-N-I. And we're talking 2401 BC. So 2401 years before Christ. Okay. So this is, so just listen to this. And let me take a step first. Okay. Homage to thee, Osiris, Lord of eternity, King of the gods, whose names are manifold, whose forms are holy. Thou forbidden being hidden form in the temple, whose Ka is holy. And remember, Ka is energy. Thou art the governor of Tatu, and also the mighty one in Sekhem. Thou art the Lord to who praises are scribed in the name of Ati. Thou art the prince of divine food in Anu. Thou art the God who is commemorated in the hidden soul, the ruler, the supreme in white in Memphis. Thou art the soul of Ra, his own body, and the place of rest. It scared me. Holy shit, part of me. Oh, my heart just jumped. Thou art the beneficent one, and are praised. You maketh thy soul to be raised up, and the Lord of the great house. Those who are mighty ones of victories, in Sheshetep, the Lord of eternity, the path of his throne is in Tacheser. The name is established in the mouths of men. Thou who art substance of two lands in Egypt, Tem, the feeder of cow, and the company of the gods, and a benefit spirit among the spirits, the God of the celestial ocean, new and new, draws from the water and sends forth the north wind at eventide, and breath from the nostrils to the satisfaction of my heart. My heart is renewed with youth and produces the stars in the celestial heights who are obedient to me, and the great doors of the sky open themselves before me. Thou art he to whom praise are scribed in the southern heaven, and thanks are given to thee in the northern heaven. The imperishable stars are under the vision, and the stars that never set are thy throne, offering appearance before you at the decree of Keb, K-E-B, write that down. The companies of the gods praise thee, and the gods of the twat. I didn't say twat. I said twat. Now it sounds like it. T-U-A-T. Oh my gosh. Oh. Okay. Welcome. Okay. And the other world, Tuat, is the other world, smell the earth and paying homage to thee. The utmost part of the earth below and before you, and the limits of the sky, entreat you with supplications when they see you. The holy ones are overcome before you, and all Egypt offers thanksgiving to you when it meets thy majesty. You are a shining spirit body, the governor of your spirit body, permanent by the rank, established it's by the rule. You are the well-doing Sekhem, S-E-K-H-E-M, and that means power. So you are the well-doing power of the company of the gods. Gracious is your face and beloved by them that seeth it. Thy fear is set in all the lands by reason of thy perfect love. And they cry out to my name, making it the first of names. And all people make offerings to me. Thou art the Lord, who are commemorated in heaven and upon earth. Many are the cries which are made to thee. And with one heart, the voice of Egypt raises cries of joy unto you. The art of the great chief, the first among the princes of the company of the gods, the stabilizer of right and truth throughout the world, the Son who has sat on the great throne of his Father. Thou art the beloved of thy mother Nut, the mighty one who overthrew the evil. Thou didst stand up and smite thy enemy and set the fear in thy adversary. Thou dost bring the boundaries of the mountain. The heart is fixed. The legs are set firm. They are the hair of the gods and of servancy of the two lands, Egypt and he. And he, Keb, has seen splendors and has decreed for him the guidance of the world by the hand as long as times endure. Thou hast made this earth with my hand, and the waters and the winds and the vegetation and all the cattle and all the feathered fowl and all the fish and all of the creeping things and all the wild animals thereof. The desert is the lawful possession of the sun now. The two lands, Egypt, are content to crown upon the throne of the Father like Ra. And thou rollest up to the horizon that hath set light over the darkness, that sendeth forth air from the plume, and floodeth the two lands like the disk at daybreak. The crown penetrateth to the height of heaven, and there art the companion of the stars and the guide of every god. Their art is beneficial in decree and speech, and is favored, a favored one of the great company of the other gods, and the beloved of the little company of the gods, which we were known, humans were known as the little company of the gods. But his sister, Isis, protected him and has repulsed the friends and turned aside to maladies of evil. She uttered the spell with the magical power of her mouth. Her tongue was perfect, and it never halted a word. Benefit in command. The word was Isis, the woman of magical spells, and the advocate of her brother. So write down Isis, because that is a word of a magical spell. And she sought him. She wandered around and around, all around this earth in sorrow. And she alighted not without finding him. She made light with her feathers. She created air with her wings, and she uttered the death cry for her brother. She raised up the inactive member whose heart was stilled. She drew him his essence. She made an heir. She reared the child in loneliness and the place where he was not known. And he grew in strength and stature, and his hand was mighty in the house of Keb. The company of the gods rejoiced. They rejoiced at the coming of Horus, the son of Osiris, whose heart was firm and triumphant, the son of Isis, the heir of Osiris. So that is the first part of the Book of the Dead. And in it, it represents a few different names, okay? And each one of these names represent a geological location. And I'm just going to say them because I know some of you will love to Google and check them out, and others are like, cool. But either way, I have to say it. So we have up to, so ABTU, and we have BAST, BAST, and we have Hensu, HENSU. You heard of Memphis, right? We also want you to the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt. You don't really have to look into that. But another place that will come up is going to be Sekhem, probably. Sekhem. Okay. Now, in the Book of the Dead, there are quite a few different locations. So I want to take this a little further because we're also going, I'm trying to get to the heart ritual. And this is all, we have to do all of this before we get to the heart ritual. So let me take another step and let's get into more of the Book of the Dead. So what I'm going to go into now was actually what they would use to invoke the sun god Ra. And this was to praise Ra, and they would use him to rise in the east. So they would face east, and they believed that he would rise in the eastern part of the heaven. Okay. So this is a traditional, what they would say. So just listen to it. Okay. Okay. Behold the Cyrus, Anit, the scribe of the holy offering of all the gods, says homage to thee, O thou who hast come to Khepera, Khepera, the creator of the gods. So Khepera, the creator of the gods. Thou art seated at my throne, and rise up in the sky, illuminating thy mother Nut. Thou art seated on thy throne as the King of gods. Thy mother Nut stretched out her hands and performed an act of homage to me. The domain of Manu received with satisfaction the goddess Mat, M-A-A-T, embraceth me at the two seasons of the day. May Ra give glory and power and truth speaking and the appearance of a living soul, so that he may gaze upon Hirokuti, to the Ka of the Osiris and the scribe of Ani, who speaks truth before Osiris, and who says, hail, all you gods of the house of the soul, who weigh heaven and earth in a balance, and who give celestial food and offerings to the dead. Hail, Tatan, who art one, the creator of mortals and of the companies of the gods of the south and of the north and of the west and of the east. Ascribe your praise to Ra, the Lord of heaven, the King, life, strength, and health, the maker of the gods. Give strength to him. Give thanks to him for its benefit, from which is enthroned. The beings celestial praise. Beings terrestrial, praise thee. Thoth and the goddess Mat, mark out our course for the day by day and every day. Thy enemy, the serpent, have been given over to the fire. The serpent friend, Sebu, S-E-B-A, have fallen along, headlong. His forelegs are bound in chains, and his hind legs has Ra carried away from him. The sons of revolt shall never more uprise. The house of the aged one keeps festival, and the voices of those who make merry are in the great place. The gods rejoice when they see Ra crowned upon his throne, and when he beams and floods the world with his sunlight. The majesty of his holy God sets out on his journey, and he goes onward until he reaches the land of Manu. The earth becomes light at his birth each day. He proceeds until he reaches the place where he was yesterday, and be at peace with me. Let me gaze upon the beauty. Let my journey above the earth. Let my slits sunder the serpent filled find Sabu. Let me destroy Epep at the world of his greatest power. Let me behold the Abtu fish at his season, and the ant fish, and the ant boat in its lake. Let me hold Horus when he is in charge of the boat of Ra, and Thoth and the goddess Mat on each side of him. Let me lay hold of the tow rope of Sektet boat, and the rope at the stern of the Metet boat. Let Ra grant to me a view of the sun, the disk, and the sight of the moon of Ah each day. Let my Ba, B-A, which also means soul, so S-O-U-L. Let my Ba, that means let my soul come forth to walk about, hinder and cinder, and whatsoever it pleases. Let my name be called out. Let it be found inscribed on the table. Let my name be called out. And those who receive offerings, let the meals from the offerings be given to me in the presence of Osiris. As to those who are in the following of Horus, let there be prepared a seat in the boat of the sun. And on the date, I lost where I was. On the sun, and on the date where the gods sail, let me receive the presence of Osiris in the land of truth, the Ka of Osiris. And now we're going to move it more into coming forth by day. And this is when they would use this. Let me see, what do I want to do? I'm trying to get to the heart ceremony. Speech of Thoth, we're not going to do yet. Just trying to find my heart ceremony. Okay, Okay, so now still don't see where it is. I hope I didn't lose something. The Eyes of Horus, we did. I'm just looking for my, I think I have to go back. I have to look at my file folder. I don't know why it shut off. So take a sip of your drink. If you have any questions, you can ask. Just looking for it. I think I was on the wrong thing. Okay, I found it. Okay, so those are two of the Book of the Dead. So the Book of the Dead is something that we are going to go over through this class because it is something that you're into ancient Egypt. You got to tap into some of that first writing. But right now, I want to go into a little bit about the Egyptian magic. So basically, I want you from what we have right now is know that we are going to be getting into the hieroglyphs, which is the communication, the sacred language of the pharaohs, so that we can use that in magic. So you are going to learn a little bit more about that. So you can hopefully draw and write your own. And you may have seen, but I did do all of your hieroglyphs. So I'll be sending that with the replay so you can have a picture of yours that you can print out and put into your wall. It is meant to bring you protection and wealth and healing. So some of the magical practices in Egypt, we're talking thousands of years ago, okay? And this is before religion. So a lot of the things that you find today are based on other people's perceptions. And I like to study things pre-religion. Like that's where my passion is. I love all of the old stuff and I like to figure out their psychology and all of that stuff. So in order for you to practice Egyptian magic, you do have to have an idea and a belief and a respect in the power of gods as well as goddesses. And Egyptians held high respect in the power of the gods, as well as judgment, resurrection, and immortality. But their magic was beautiful and it was noble. And that's one of the reasons why this amazing native Egyptian religious workings are still alive thousands of years later. So most of the earliest Egyptian magic comes between 6 and 7,000 years ago. And that's because of the works that they have found. But it does reflect the belief in the god system. So the magic of the Egyptians represent two different kinds of magic. The first one is what is employed for a legitimate purpose. So this purpose had an idea of benefiting either the living or the dead. So that's one of the reasons why they would do magic. The second reason why they would do magic is because magic was made use of the further plots and schemes to bring about calamities upon those who were against. So they used it for protective magic as well as they did do cursing magic. And they would protect themselves against people's themes. And it was intended to reflect back on who it was being directed from. So a lot of the text in which we see how this magic was actually made by certain passages that people did side by side. And it had to do with spiritual conception, that there can be no doubt that the chief or the object of the magical ritual or the ceremony or the book had to benefit all of them. And the Egyptians did like to practice together. They were very ritualistic, but they were very misunderstood by strangers to their country. And because of that, there's so many different wrong and exaggerated ideas about the religion that's been circulated. But the magical ceremonies were performed all the time. They were very superstitious, but they are presented as being ignorant with silly acts of superstition, or their magic was known as the black art. But in fact, it was not. So the ancient Egyptians and their magic was very directed against the powers of darkness. And it was invented in order for them to invoke a class of beneficial and benevolent beings to their help. So the Egyptians' aim was to be able to connect to the gods and have the gods work for them and to compel them to do what they wanted, to grant their desire. I mean, think about people praying today, right? They pray for whatever it is that they want their desire to come about. And these were known to create great results. And results were obtained by many uses of certain words. And all of these words were muttered and uttered at a proper tone. And if a qualified man could speak such words, or might be written upon papyrus or precious stones and the like, and worn on the person, when their effect could be transmitted to any distance. So you had to be qualified. You had to be able to manifest, but that was what every person doing this magic was doing. That was what their training was to try to connect to the God's realm and have that God come down. So they believed that their magic could reach any distance in any realm. And just like a lot of the shamanistic or neo-pagan cultures, they believed in the world tree, right? The middle world where we live, in the underworld. So they wore and practiced this. And as almost every man or woman or child in Egypt who could afford it would wear some kind of charm or talisman. And it was not to be wondered what it was. You know, the Egyptians were at a very early period, and they were regarded as a nation of magicians and sorcerers. The Hebrew, the Greek, and the Roman writers refer to them as experts in the occult sciences, as possessors of powers, which could, according to circumstances, be employed to do either good or harm to man. And from the Hebrews, we received that it is true, that there was considerable information about the powers of the Egyptian magicians. Saint Stephen boasts that the great legislator Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and declared that he was mighty in words and in deeds. And there were numerous features in the life of this remarkable man was shrewd, that he was acquainted with many of the practices of Egyptian magic. The phrase mighty in words probably means that, like the goddess Isis, strong of tongue, and uttered the words of power, in which he knew with correct pronunciation, would in his speech, that if it was perfect, both in giving and commanding and saying the word, the turning of the power, which was also known as the turning of the serpent, right? The serpent you see on a lot of the pharaoh's crowns, the turning of the serpent into what was apparently a wooden stick, a wand, and the turning of the stick, the turning of the wand would go and back into a withering snake, right? You've heard that in the Bible stories. Well, they have been performing from the East, the most ancient period, Egyptian magic, and the power to control and direct the movement of venomous reptiles. And it was one of the things that the Egyptians was most proud of. And it was the one thing that Moses was most skillful at. And already in the time when the pyramids were being built, this was by no means the only proof which Moses gives that he was versed in the magic of Egyptians. There's also, I don't know if you've ever heard of the sage Aba-Aner or the king Nectambus. And there's other magicians of Egypt that are very well known. And it says that he and Aaron, this is in the Bible as well, he and Aaron possessed a wonderful rod, Aaron's rod, by means of which they worked their wonders. And the word of Moses, Aaron lifted upon his rod and spoke the waters, and they became blood. He stretched it out over the waters, and frogs appeared. When the dust was spitting on the wand or on the rod, it became life, and so on. So Moses sprinkled ashes towards the heaven, and it became boils and blains upon man and beast. He stretched out his wand, and there was hail and fire mingled with hail, very grievous, and the flax and the barley was smitten. He stretched out his rod, and the locusts came, and after them the darkness. Now Moses did these things and brought about the death of the firstborn among the Egyptians by the command of his God and by the means of the word in which he told him to speak. But although we are told by Hebrew, the writer, that the Egyptian magicians could not imitate all of the miracles of Moses, it was quite certain that every Egyptian magician believed that he could perform things equally marvelous by merely uttering the name of one of his gods, or through the words of power that he learned to recite. For many instances recorded, Egyptian magicians uttering and destroying their enemies by the recital of a few words possessed by the magical power of the Egyptian gods. But there are some distinctions, and some of that is that between the magic of Moses and that of the Egyptians, among whom he lived, the former was wrought by the command of the God of Hebrews. So you can see where religion, of course, got in with the Egyptian magic. And then it tells later on of the history of Moses dealing with the Egyptians. There's the account of how he stretched his hand over the sea and he caused the sea to go back by the strong east wind all that night and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left hand. When the Egyptians had come between the two walls of fire, by God's command, Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea and returned his strength, and the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, all the host of the Pharaoh that came to the sea after them. So the waters of the sea, the command of the waters of the sea, or the river, was claimed by the Egyptian magician. And this actually happened long before the time of Moses. So you can see from an interesting story that was preserved in the Westcar Papyrus, Westcar Papyrus, that this document was written in the early part of the 1550th year before Christ, Moses' story. And it's clear that these stories with a date from this early are in fact as old as the Great Pyramid. And that the story is actually related to King Cheops, which is known as, well, King Khufu, but it's spelled, you say it Cheops, Khufu, as an event which happened in the time of the king's father, and as a proof that the wonderful powers of magic, which were possessed by the priest, which was called, okay, I gotta take a, which was called, maybe I should spell it so you know what I'm going through. But it's TCHATCHA dash EM dash ANKA or H. So Chacha M Ankh. See, so Chacha M Ankh. So that is the word that is actually the magic and the wonderful power that can split the water. That's the Egyptian word. Of course, you have to say it properly. I mean, I live on the ocean. I've never been able to split the water. I may be a little, with that one. But that is the word. And it seems that on a certain day, King Sennacherib was in low spirits. So he felt like shit. Okay, we all have days like that. And he applied to the nobles of his royal household, expecting that they would find something where his heart might be made happy. But as they could do nothing to cheer up this king, he gave orders that the priest and the writer of books should Tetricamaka Ankh should be brought into his presence immediately. And in accordance with the royal command, he was at once brought. So he said to them, I turned to the nobles of my royal household, seeking for some means where I might cheer my heart, but they have found nothing for me. Then the priest made answer and advised the king to take himself to the lake near the palace and to go for a sail on it in a boat which had been comfortably furnished from things from his royal house. For, he said, the heart of the majesty will rejoice and be glad when he sails about hither and thither, and don't see the beautiful thickets which are on the lake. And when you see the pretty banks thereof of the beautiful fields, then your heart will feel happiness. And he next begged that the king would allow him to organize the journey and asked for his permission to let him bring 20 ebony paddles. Have you ever seen ebony wood? It is so amazing. I have like an ebony wood petrified wand. It's amazing. But it was laid in gold, like a paddle was laid in gold. And also 20 young virgins. So he asked permission to let him bring 20 ebony patterns inlaid with gold and 20 young virgins having beautiful heads of hair and lovely forms and shapely limbs and 20 nets where these virgins may array themselves instead of their own ordinary garments. The virgins were to row and sing to his majesty. To these proposals, the king assented. And when all was ready, he took his place in the boat. And while the women were rowing him around hither and thither, the king watched him, and his heart became released from care. Now, as one of the young women was rowing, she entangled herself in some way in her hair, and one of her ornaments, which was made of new turquoise, fell into the water and sank. She ceased to row, and not herself only, but all of the other maidens ceased to row also. And when they saw the king, when the king saw that the maidens had ceased from their work, he said to them, "Will ye not row?" And they replied, "Our leader has ceased to row." Then turning to the maiden who dropped her ornament overboard, he asked her why she was not rowing, whereupon she told him what happened. And on this, the king promised that he would get back the ornament for her. So then the king commanded, Techacha monk, I wish I could say it, Techacha would appear before him at once. And as soon as the sage had been brought to the presence, he said to him, "O Tachamus Emok, my brother, I have done accordingly to my word, and my heart of my majesty became glad when I saw how the maidens rose. But now an ornament, which is made of new turquoise, that belongs to one of the maidens who row, has fallen into the water, and she has in consequence become silent and has ceased to row, and that's disturbed the rowing of those in her company. I said to her, why don't you not row? And she said, an ornament of mine made of new turquoise fell into the water. Then I said to her, I will get it back for you. And thereupon the priest and writer of books, Tachem Unk, spake certain words of power, Hekau, Hekau, and having this cause one section of the water of the lake to go upon the other, he found the ornament laying upon a potsherd, and he took it and gave it to the maiden. Now the water has 12 cubits deep, whatever that was. But when Tachem Kong, I almost ripped my thing off. When Tachem Onk had lifted one of the sections of water onto the other, that portion became 24 cubits deep. So the magician again uttered the words of power, and the water of the lake became as it had been before. He caused one portion of it to go up to the other, And the king prepared a feast for all of his royal household and rewarded Chetat, a monk, with gifts of every kind. Such is a story of power possessed by the magicians of the time of King Cheops, who resigned at the beginning of the fourth dynasty, about 3800 BC, before Christ. And the copy of the story, which we possess, is older than the period when Moses lived. So there can be no possibility of our seeing it in a distorted version of the miracle of the waters of the sea, standing like walls, on one right hand and one the left hand, and the other hand of Moses' miracle. And we have some connection with that of Tetramenonk. And among the Greek and Romans, there is considerable respect that was entertained, not only for the wisdom of the Egyptians, but for the power of working magic, which they were supposed to possess. And the Greek travelers who visited Egypt brought back to their own country lots of information regarding its religion and its civilization. And although it was very misunderstood, many things were misunderstood, they still saw and heard it there. They experienced it. And some of the greatest thinkers among the Greeks regarded that country not only as the home of knowledge and the source of civilization of the arts, but it was the fountainhead and what has been called white magic and black art. And in some respects, they exaggerated the powers of the Egyptians, but frequently, when the classical writers were well informed, they only ascribed them to magical knowledge, which the Egyptian magicians themselves claimed to possess. And I love this because there is a striking instance of this is given in the second book of Metamorphoses of Apuleius. Yeah. How can let me just kind of, I'm going to type this into the chat, because that is a good book. I don't know if you can like get it at any bookstore or anything, but I just put it there so I could remember that I mentioned it. And it is remembered, and it's narrated in that. And this book represents a student named Telephron. And this is, I don't know if I can get into it, but he was wondering about, and all of these, he was a poor person just wondering about, he was penniless. Anyway, he was roaming about and he saw an old man standing on a large block of stone. And this man was in a proclamation that he would undertake a guard, or he would undertake to guard a dead body and receive a good reward. So this young kid, Telephron, asked if dead men were in the habit of running away. And the old man said to the effect that the witches all over Thessaly used to tear off pieces of flesh from the faces of the dead with their teeth, and order to make magical spells by means of them, and to prevent these dead bodies must need to be watched at night. So the young man then asked, well, what his duties would be if he undertook the post. And he was told that he would have to keep them awake all night, to gaze fixedly upon the dead body and to look neither to the right hand or to the left, and not to close the eyes, not even a wink. And this was absolutely necessary because the witches were able to get out of their skins and to take form of a bird or a dog or a mouse. And their craftiness was such that they could take forms of flies and cast sleep upon the watcher. And if the watcher relaxed, his attention and the body became mutated by the witches. The pieces of flesh torn away would have to be made good from the body of the watcher. Telephon agreed that he would take on this duty. Like, and for 1,000 Numi was led by the old man to a house, and having been taken into the room where a dead body was, found a man making notes on tablets to the effect that nose, eyes, ears, lips, and chin were untouched and whole. But having been provided with a lamp and some oil that night, he began his watch, and all went well, notwithstanding that he was greatly afraid until the dead of the night, when a weasel came into the chamber. And like this could be like a fire by the fire, campground story. The weasel came into the chamber and looked confidently at the watcher, but he drove the animal, which was no doubt a witch, from the room, and he fell fast asleep. In the early morning, he was suddenly awakened by the trumpets of the soldiers. And almost immediately, the window of the dead man came to him with 7 witnesses and began to examine the body to see if it was intact, finding that no injury had been done to it. And she ordered her steward to pay Telephron his fee. And so he was grateful, and she was grateful to him, that she promised to make him one of her household. In attempting to express this thanks, however, he made use of some inauspicious words, and immediately the servants of the house fell upon him. And he used this and plucked out his roots and tore his clothes and cast upon him. Well, the servants knew, and they cast him out of the house. Soon afterwards, while he was wandering about, he saw the funeral procession pass through the forum. And at that moment, the old man that took him to that room went in with sobs and tears and accused the widow of poisoning a nephew so that she might inherit his property and merit her new lover. Presently, the mob, which had gathered together, wanted to set her house on fire, and some people began to stone her. So the small boys started throwing stones at her. And while she denied this accusation and had called upon the gods to witness their innocence, or would have them witness her protection, that old man cried out, "Let, then, divine providence decide the truth," in answer to her denial. Behold, the famous prophet Zaklas of Egyptian dwelleth among us, and has promised me that for much money he will make the soul of the dead man, return from the place of death. And we're going to get into the power of Isis and some of these Egyptian goddess and the magic. And this story actually reflects a lot about the power of Isis and where it goes in from the underworld. So this old man, okay, so he promised that for lots of money that he would take the soul of the dead and return it to the place of the death in the underworld, and to make it to dwell in his body again for a short time. Well, with these words, he led forward a man dressed in linen and wearing palm leaf sandals, who, like all the Egyptian priests, had a shaved head. And having kissed his hand and embraced his legs, he implored him by the stars and by the gods of the underworld and by the island of the Nile to restore life to the dead body if only for the smallest possible time, so that the truth of his accusation against the widow could be proved. That Zacchaeus touched the mouth and the breath of the dead man 3 times with a plant, and having turned his face to the east and prayed, the lungs of the corpse began to fill with breath, and his heart to beat, and raising his head and his shoulders, he asked why he had been called back to life. And then he begged to be allowed to rest in peace. And at this moment, Zacchaeus addressed to him and told him that he had the power through his prayers to cause the fines to come true, and ordered him to make known by means that which he had died. And with a groan he replied that the wife who had recently married him poisoned to drink, that he died in consequences, that the wife at once contradicted the words of her husband and of the people who were standing around. Some took one side and some took the other. But the length of the husband declared that he would have proven his truth of his own. And that was because of the power of Telephron, who had attempted to guard his body, and told those present that the witches, after making many attempts to elude his vigilance, had cast deep sleep upon him. And the next called upon himself by the name, which happened to be Telephron. So what? Like that of his watcher. And while he was endeavoring and to obey their spells, the watcher rose up unconsciously and walked out. Seeing this, the witches forced their way into the room through some unknown place, and have taken off the nose and the ears of the watcher. They placed models of these members in their places. Those who heard these words looked fixedly at the young man, who at once put up his hands and touched the members where the nose came off in his hand, and his ears slipped through his fingers onto the ground. And the end of the story does not concern us. And so we pass on to the note that the act of touching the mouth, which Zacchaeus performed, is of course a part of the ceremony called opening the mouth. And this ceremony is a major ceremony in the Egyptian magic. And so we're going to get a little bit into that. So opening the mouth is referred to as a religious text, and it was considered to be very extremely important. And it was important because it had to do with the welfare of the dead, or the welfare of the spirit, and that the power of bringing back the dead to life, which Apuleius ascribed to the priest or magician, was actually claimed thousands of years before Christ by the sages of Egypt. And this story is also a form and following the story of the Westcar papyrus. So I'm going to put that in the chat too. Okay. And a lot of you already know that a lot of modern day religion do use ancient texts and beliefs, right? And so that is just another one, right? Where the son of the king Cheops, so 3800 before Christ, was famous as the man who was able to preserve the Book of the Dead. Okay, and that was the script that I read you beforehand. But in the discovery and the connection of the chapters that we're going to go through, there is lots of wonderful work. And a lot of this has to do with powers of working magic that was possessed by the ancients. And it also represents things in which men of old and new, men and women, whether we know it or we do not, we can call our majesty, our sage in our own time. And that we may not have the answers, but we can get the answers. And that's the one thing that King Cheops would say, is he was famous for saying, I will cause thy majesty to see a sage in their own time, and one who knoweth not thee, the one that you don't know. In reply, he said, who is this man? It is certain that this man who dwells in the heavens is over 110 years old. And to this very day, he has eaten loaves of bread and the shoulder of an ox, and he's drank hundreds of measures of ale. So by giving offerings to the spirit, we can call upon. So offering is very important to the spirit world. So we can call our own majesty by calling Cheops. Okay. And I'm going to write down Cheops. And some of you may have heard it before. I punched it into the chat. I'm getting good at this double, whatever it is I'm doing, multitasking. So if you use the word Cheops, you are calling your own personal sage. So until we meet next time, I want you to use the word Cheops and ask for guidance about something, okay? And how to do that, okay, some of you might not, but when I seek guidance, I'll go like this. I like to write it down, like I'm a writer. So I like to write down things, and I usually write a question. And one thing I'll do is like, what magical power do I need to implement in my life? And after I write that, I'm going to write down Cheops. And see, as I'm writing it, I'm saying it. It doesn't matter if you say it out loud or mentally. It doesn't matter. You want to write it out because your divine eyes, your higher self sees through your eyes. So what I have is, what magical power should I practice in my life right now? I forgot right now. Cheops, Cheops, Cheops. Now, obviously, I'm here talking, but I'm going to do this later, and I'm going to write down a list of some magical powers until one comes to me, and it's like said, or it's shown, right? And something will automatically speak out. And that's why journaling is so good, because as soon as you start to write and you get to the point where your sentence is being completed before you write it, you're in a channel. So I want you to use Cheops to call your inner sage for wisdom about whatever it is you're trying to figure out in your day. Okay. And know that Cheops is the name to call your sage, not some other stranger sage, yours. Okay. And let me see. So that is actually an instrument that we can use to connect our magic work. So the words that I've spoken today, we're going to focus on this month. And I want to now move to the heart. I've said that like 3 times, but I haven't been able to find it yet. Okay, the amulet of the heart. I found it. I found it. Oh, that's scary. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the heart. Okay, so the heart is like the whole basic foundation of Egyptian magic. Okay, and when it comes to amulets, magical stones or amulets, the word amulet is a name given to a class of objects or ornaments that represent specific energies. And so they were used in their wear, so how they dress, and they always had some kind of charm, like I said earlier. But they would employ the Egyptian power and they would protect the human body, whether it is protecting the human body from the living or the dead. But they firmly believed in protecting from baleful influences and from attacks of visible and invisible enemies or foes. So the word amulet is derived from the Arabic root that means to bear or to carry. So an amulet is something that is meant to be carried or worn. And the name is applied broadly to any kind of talisman or ornament that has supernatural powers. And the supernatural powers are ascribed. And so it's not clear whether the amulet in ancient Egypt was intended, first of all, to protect the living or the dead body, but it was originally worn to guard its owner from savage animals and beasts and serpents and snakes. And then it actually developed to more of a religious idea, and the beliefs of these talismans progressed. As a result, new amulets representing new views were invented, and the objects were able to protect the living. And they are an easy transition for our mind and for those who wear them to be protected. So one of the things that we talk about and that we believed was the life of the spirit and the life of the body. And it is believed to spring, like our life sprang from the spirit. And the influence of our beliefs, whether our body is alive or dead, became powerful, more powerful by the storehouse of amulets used. So this is what the Egyptians believed, that each member was placed under specific protection of some kind of amulet, and that there was a number of objects in which they believed to use and protect their body. I'm the same way. Okay, I got an amulet for every single thing I believe in, and I love it. But they did that too in the ancient times. So these were believed to have to protect the body. They made amulets to protect from serpents, from worms, from mildew, from decay. They made amulets to draw in lavish things. They used them in between bandages. So they would use to lay amulets on the dead. And they used it for pretty much everything. Whatever the amulet sprang into being, whatever they could bring into being, there was an amulet for that. But certain amulets represented beliefs and superstition, and even the ancient Egyptians were also doubtful about their meanings unless they created what it was for themselves. So their spirituality was based on the powers that they were able to bring in and manifest into physical form. So there's two kinds of amulets the ancient Egyptians used. One of them, the first one, was inscribed with a magical formula, and the second one was not. So in earlier ancient Egypt, The formulas or words were recited over the amulet that were worn by the living, or they would place it on the dead. Most of the times, anything placed on the dead were done by priests or men who were performing religious services by the community. But it was in the power of every man, and they believed that it was only the gifted. So not everyone could create an amulet. It was only the special ones. But they would employ them. And the magical power and the prayers were carved and usually cut onto the amulet. And they became possessed of a twofold power. That's what they used to call it. The power which was thought to be inherent of the substance of which the amulet was made. Okay, so let's think about the power of lapis lazuli. Okay, that's an Egyptian stone. And that they would lay the words and inscribe it. So they would represent the intention put into the formula. And the earliest names for this, our intention upon amulet, is Hekau or Heku, Hekau. And this was the word. And it was so necessary to hold on to your power and say it. Hold on to what you want. Hekau or Heku, Heku, Heku. And that represented word of power. So anytime you just need power, Heku. And that is probably more than 1,000 years earlier. That one magical word is probably 1,000 years earlier than the Book of the Dead. So a lot of these words, we're talking like so long ago. The other thing was, I'm almost finished. I know I'm a few minutes over, but the other thing is in the 16th century before Christ, and probably more than 1,000 years earlier, there was a special section. And this is in the Book of the Dead. And it was with the object of causing them to come to whoever or whatever place they were in. And it was said that by using that word, okay, so by using Hekau, that the power was swifter than the greyhound and quicker than the light. And the earliest Egyptian amulets known are pieces of green stone. And it was known as CHIST. And I believe, I mean, I've never seen this stone, but I believe that it was similar to malachite. I think there is a relation there. But there was these green pieces of stone that they would use in various shapes, whether it was animals or hearts or whatever. And they were laid upon the breast of the spirit or of the deceased. And these were found in large numbers in prehistoric graves in early places in Egypt. And it's most likely that they were made by the original Aboriginal inhabitants of Egypt, and that they had conjures, and they were made as a conjure. And when they were found, they were proclaimed that they belonged to the cult. I mean, what cult were they talking about back then? We're talking about something that was like so old, right? Well, I guess I don't know if it's pre-Neolithic period. I'd have to look at the timeline on that. But with the advent of the people who we call Egyptians, their powers have become very rare. And this represents a lot of the things that they found. So we're still trying to figure out, you know, what was that green stone and the scarabs, and why did they put the scarab there, right? Once you get to learn all about the scarabs and their magic too. So I hope you found some of this history to be interesting, but the amulet of the heart is something that I wanted to do now. So the heart was not only the seat of the power of life, but it was also the source of both good and evil thoughts. The heart. I mean, I kind of like that. Okay. So the heart to the ancient Egyptians, the seat of the power of life, but the source of both good and evil thoughts. And it sometimes typified the conscious. It was guarded after death with special care and was mummified separately. And then with the lungs, they preserved in a jar. And that was placed under the protection of the god Teamuthif. And its preservation was considered to be so important that a text was introduced into the Book of the Dead at an early period. And with that view of providing the deceased with the heart in the place of that which has been removed in the process of mummification, the text reads, "May my heart be with me in the house of hearts. May my breath be with me in the house of hearts. May my heart be with me, and may it rest there, for I shall not eat of the cakes of Osiris on the eastern side of the lake of the flowers, neither shall I have a boat where to go in the Nile, nor another wherein to go up, nor shall I be able to sail down the Nile with thee. May my mouth be given to me, that I may speak within, and my 2 legs to walk there within, and to my hands and arms to overthrow my foe. May the doors of heaven be opened unto me. May Seb, the Prince of God, open wide his 2 jaws unto me. May he open my eyes, which are blindfolded. May he cause me to stretch apart my 2 legs, which are bound together. And may Apnu, Anubis, make my thighs to be firm. Yeah, I need some firm thighs. Make my thighs to be firm, so that I can stand upon them. May the goddess Sekhmet make me to rise, so that I may ascend into heaven, that may I command in the house of Ka energy, and Ptah be done. I shall understand with my heart. I shall gain the mastery of my heart. I shall gain the mastery of my 2 hands, and I shall gain the mastery over my legs. I shall have the mastery to do whatever my Ka, energy and soul, pleases. My soul shall not be fettered to my body at the gates of the underworld, but I shall enter in and come forth in peace. I mean, I think that's pretty incredible. That, what I just read, was known as the amulet of the heart. And they would say that. And the amulet of the heart, let me draw it. Because remember, I said earlier, it was a picture of the heart with a trachea. Well, in the Egyptian symbologies on their temples and stuff, it is the jug. So it kind of looks like, I'm not an artist. I know some of you are fabulous artists. Okay, so I'm just going to draw my handles. Okay, see that? That's supposed to look like a jar with handles on the side, but you can also see that it looks like a head with ears. So that is the amulet of the heart. That's what it looks like. Okay. And there's another symbol that it is also used which is later on. And that one is, I don't know if I have it, but that is the heart and the trachea. And I'm going to post that with the video. Let me write it down. So we're going to use the heart amulet this month. So I'm going to send that with you, the heart amulet and the inscription. And I want you to do this ritual that I'm going to send you. And there is a little bit more to that because there's an area where we can protect ourselves from certain negative energies and stuff. So we're going to do heart magic first this month until we meet. Well, not this month. When's the next class? I think it's coming up within 2 weeks. So heart magic we're going into, okay? Now, before you go, let me just give you a little timeline. So we did the loss of Shu and the Egyptian creation story. And the next one we're going to do is, I am going to do a little bit about Ra and Apophis. And then we're going to go into the forbidden love. And then we're going to go into Sekhmet and Ra next class, because that represents where there's been a lot of change with the gods and the humans. And that's where punishment, like the gods and punishment kind of came in. And then we're going into Ra's secret name. So as far as Egyptian magic, the magic that we're going to be practicing is Ra, Horus, Osiris, Isis, Hathor. I have a couple of different ones. I don't know which ones to pick. There might even be more. But I want to also make sure that we hit the different gods in all 3 realms, so that you can use this magic in your practice. So listen to this video again. I'll send it out tomorrow, by tomorrow. Hopefully I can know it'll be tomorrow. And you're going to have to listen to it, take notes, put some of these words in your books of shadows and try them out. Okay. And I'm not giving you instructions on how to try them out, because I just want you to say it. And, you know, it's normal, because even for me, when I say new words or when I learn new words, most of the time I don't say them the way they used to, but it sounds good for me and I know my spirits are understanding me. So you want to find your tongue and you want to feel comfortable. The gods don't judge with how you say something. They feel your vibration. You're sending out that pattern into the world. It's not how you say it. Okay. So until then, so you're going to get the replay. I have a book list if you guys want to delve into it. If not, you don't have to. I know some of it's perfect. And I have your own hieroglyphs. I already made them today. So I think I'm going to send you those tonight, just because they look really cool. And hopefully soon you'll be able to write some Egyptian language too. So with that, I think I'll let you go, but I normally like to pull a card. So let me grab one. Is there any cards anywhere? Oh, girl up front. Okay, I got my box. It looks like we have angel. Oh, we do. We have attraction cards. Okay, I want to do those ones. I haven't used these for a long time. Okay, so before we go, let's see. How is our ancient magic influencing us? The gods. And that's what I love, is like with ancient magic or Egyptian magic and ancient, you're working with God. Like when I first started doing my magic, that's what I did, is I would seek which god matched the energy that I wanted, and I would practice summoning or invoking that goddess. And I do feel that doing that type of work not just the full moon, but now that we're doing Egyptian magic, right, together, you will experience your power. So know that you are divine. I don't care if you don't feel it or not, you are. I believe in you. And let's see your Egyptian magic at play. So let's go with B. I have. What do you have? When I truly surrender to my desires, to the universe, a mighty force of faith steps in. That gave me goosebumps. I think you needed that. Surrender. You're not allowed to control. Surrender and tell the world, the universe, this is what I need. Give me my faith. And you'll see it. Okay, let's do Carolyn. Pull one for you. I am in awe of the magnificent guidance that's available to me. I love that one for you because it does fit, because you are getting yourself out there and you want the guidance to come, especially for your show. Okay, Lorraine, let's see what you get. Okay, what is this? Your Egyptian magic. And then when we get into the gods, you'll get to see like which archetype you're actually connecting to. When I cultivate a spiritual connection, I can trust the universe no matter what. I love that. That's a no matter what. It's all in the universe's hands. You're good to go. And look how green it is, like you're cultivating. And for those who are doing the replay, I know there's like more than half of you. Let's pull a card for those that are doing the replay. What do they get? Feeling good will bring me far more than whatever I thought I needed. We do have to feel good. And that was mentioned tonight, right? So we're going to use raw. Just have some fun with it. So write those words of power down. I'll do a little review and send it along, and have a great night. Thank you for joining me. See you next time. Part 2 of 6. Bye-bye.